I'll tell ya. Hi, I'm Shamaya, it's like papaya, except it's not, and this is Plot Twist Please, a place where I like to talk about media, mental health, and the intersection of those things. I am a Black autistic woman. It is more obvious that I am Black than that I am autistic, but both of those things are true. Guess what we're gonna talk about? Guess. We're gonna talk about autism, being adorable, and infantilization. Now, if you don't know what infantilization is, that's all right, I got you. Infantilization is the perception that someone is young or has childlike characteristics. Now, first of all, I feel like this is important to talk about because it impacts a lot of autistic people's lives. It impacts a lot of interactions that non-autistic people, or allistic people, if you're new to the terminology, have with autistic people, including long-term and short-term relationships. Yeah. I feel like a lot of the time I am perceived as someone who is innocent or cute, which is nice, but it's different when you're on the spectrum and there's all these different connotations that come with it. And I'll explain that further. First it was like, oh, how sweet. People want to be around me. That's really sweet. But then it started to kind of get to me and it started to become not a positive thing in my eyes. And I started to internalize it. And then it came with this whole complex of being too adorable to be taken seriously, or to even be viewed as a potential romantic partner, or even to be considered a worthy friend. And then all these other complexes, like, am I actually capable of being an adult? Am I actually capable of taking care of myself? And that's intertwined with how I've been treated throughout the course of my life. All this is a domino effect, and I'm going to explain why. So why do you think autistic people are typically perceived as adorable? First of all, I want to note that none of these characteristics that I'm about to list are reasons that we should be treated like children if we're adults. I'm just trying to give an idea of why we might be perceived as such. These fruit flies are coming from my collarbone, coming from my life. So why? Why are we perceived as adorable? First of all, a lot of us, the way that we are socialized, we learn to be overly explanatory with our bodies and overly expressive with our faces. It's not just because I have a theater background. Although, wait a minute. Here's the thing, a lot of autistic people are drawn to the theater because it helps them socialize and because they learn to study humans as a way of survival, and theater is a more direct way of doing that. Maybe that's linked, put a pin in that. Inspector Gadget, Shamaya is about to put a pin in that. Anyway, because we use a lot of exaggerated facial expressions a lot of the time, or we might, you know, just to try to blend in with humans, that can be perceived as childlike because children tend to be really expressive. They tend to really have no holds barred in terms of their physicality. They tend to be unaware of their body, and a lot of autistic people have really poor coordination or underdeveloped spatial awareness, or just more difficulty being cognizant of how much space they're taking up. And how much they're actually using their body to communicate. And I'd imagine that an autistic person would also fall on the other side of the spectrum where they lack physicality at all in communicating, and that makes it hard for people to view them as someone comfortable taking up space, you know? Another reason why someone might interpret autistic behaviors as childlike is because we tend, a lot of us, to miss social cues. And I put around missing social cues because I'm not sure that every one of us misses them completely, because I know I don't. But I do think that a lot of us have a hard time interpreting what those cues actually mean and knowing how to actually respond to them and how to interact with them. So it may not be necessarily that we missed that someone scratched their ear or that someone leaned to the left a little bit when they were explaining how their day went. Maybe we just don't know what those gestures mean because how are you supposed to? Anyway, that can contribute to childlike behavior, because if we don't know what to say, the things that we do say in response in a conversation seem really off the wall, might seem out of nowhere, out of the blue, you know, it might make people scratch their heads like, how in the world did they come up with that in this context? Like, where did that thought come from? Thankfully, I have a lot of friends now who are really gracious and who understand why I may interject in ways that are kind of really off the wall. But I also understand that for a lot of us, that might be just an attempt to socialize, an attempt to connect with other people, but we may not necessarily know how to go about that in the most charismatic ways. It's hard. Another attribute that might be interpreted as childlike is the way that we engage with our special interests, or even the nature of our special interests in general. So a lot of us have very specific things that we cling onto, whether it's like a fandom or a pop culture thing or something really niche, like, you know, mason jars. Or I collect candles, so I have candles all around my house. Someone might have like a leaf collection or a rock collection. When I was younger, I had a rock collection. Like it varies depending on the person, but a lot of us have very specific special interests that we dive into or that we kind of rely on as a constant in our lives because we love consistency. We do. Or rather, we tend to. I try to be very careful about my language, about talking about autistic people as a conglomerate in terms of the diagnostic criteria as opposed to things that can be very individualized in one's autistic experience. Let's just be cognizant of that. That part is fluid. Back to special interests. You'll see these Disney adults, as they're called, and I hate that people refer to them that way because I feel like it's just ableist and rude. So a lot of us be trying to get our joy, autistic people that is, through our special interests, and the way that we engage with them may seem kind of like obsessive or seem overbearing to people who are used to hearing about them all the time, but we love our special interests. Now we know how powerful media is, and if you're on this channel, please like and subscribe, or you engage with my content a lot, then you understand how deeply I believe that media impacts how we view the world and how we view other humans in the world, whether we interact with those people or not. We look at shows like Love on the Spectrum that paint autistic people in a childlike way. You know, if you think about the music choices when autistic people are being referenced, if you think about the way that autistic people are described, very rarely highlights their specific experience rather than everyone else's experience in relation to them. The way that they're talked about, Toby likes trains, crayons, and standing in water. Like, put those, like those specific scenes that I'm talking about where they're being described next to like some study about child development, it would sound synonymous. Like they would sound like the same voiceover, the pacing, the tone of voice, which is weird. If we're comparing how we talk about grown adults to how we talk about children, they should not be the same. This is a huge pain point with a lot of disabled folks. People devalue our voices and they want to listen to our caretakers over ours, or they want to listen to the people who claim to be advocating for us over us. I also often see these creators or influencers highlighting their autistic sibling or their autistic child. And I can't help but feel nervous. I'm nervous about what is the level of coercion as it pertains to that autistic person being involved in the social media industry, because once you put something online, you're part of the industry. Whether you believe you are or not, whether you partake in it extensively or not, you're a part of the digital landscape once you put something online. Here's the thing. I didn't know I was autistic till I was like 23, 24. And I decided to come on here and talk about my experiences, knowing that whoever I met in person, and at this point, strangers that I meet who recognize me from online, knowing that if I was going to walk into an audition, if I was going to walk into a meeting with a client, there is a large chance that that person might know that I'm autistic before I even meet them, before I go on a date. Even if it's small, there's a chance this person might already know that I'm autistic. That is a lot of information to reveal about yourself. Now imagine having to do that involuntarily at a young age where you don't even understand being online. You don't even understand the repercussions for parasocial relationships or having your intimacies of your life displayed for the world to see. It irks me. It irks me. And now when we're talking about autistic adults, it irks me in a different way, because yes, you can potentially, you can fathom what putting your life online can mean for the quality of life that you'll have. But who's to say that you are directly profiting from that exposure? If this is your sister's account or your caretaker's account and they're making money off of you, well, I just worry about the legality of that. I worry about like how much you're actually gaining. It also just contributes to this culture of speaking over disabled people. There are a lot of organizations out there, big organizations, that claim to advocate for us, that claim to aim for us to have better quality of life, but have quite literally traumatized us and stigmatized autism and infantilized us and harmed our community extensively. And we tell them, we are telling them, and they are not listening. This is probably because most of the people who are on the levels, like the higher levels, like on the executive boards and who have most of the power within those organizations aren't autistic themselves. That's why I think we really need to pour into those communities, or pour into those businesses that claim to be advocating for us and are actually led by us. Super, super four. You think that it was self-explanatory, but people want to pretend to be obtuse. People want to be obtuse over here. So yes, infantilization of autistic people not only impacts us negatively on the institutional level, but it also impacts us in our individual lives. I'll explain why. When you look at the people on Love on the Spectrum and you see the way that they're being categorized, this is largely due to, you know, the producers, the directors, the people who orchestrated this. I'm an artist and craftsmanship is really important to me. And the way that you tell a story is almost more important than the story itself. When you watch that show, do you want to date any of those people? This isn't a pejorative. I'm trying to illustrate to you how they're packaged on the show. They're basically treated like children, and no adult should want to date a child. That's not someone who's depicted as being mature enough to handle a relationship. You'd be surprised at how much we relate to other adults. Now, if you're friends with an autistic person, this probably doesn't apply to you. Like you probably don't see them as a child. But I want you to be careful of the language that you use around us. I want you to be careful of how you help us when you do. Like if you're someone who we rely on to help decipher social cues, or if you're someone who often offers us advice in our relationships, I want you to be careful because yes, if we ask, great. Or if we might potentially be in danger, great. Please offer that help. Please offer that information. But be careful not to treat us like children or to treat us like we don't know ourselves, because a lot of us know ourselves very deeply. A lot of us are very in tune with our own needs. Just be careful. Be careful walking that line. Even if you are romantically partnered with us, the same applies. Now, what do we do instead? How do we not infantilize autistic people, more specifically autistic adults? I'll tell ya. First of all, listen to us and ask us questions. Don't assume that we need help, that we want help. Just ask questions. Also, support organizations that are primarily led by autistic people. Do your research. Be careful of media that depicts us and our experience as tragic, but doesn't highlight what it's actually like to live as an autistic person. I have some great suggestions for media that does this extremely well. One of them is Heartbreak High. I'm loving this show right now. I'm only in like the first couple episodes, but I'm like, oh, they're doing it right. And lastly, help us to advocate for ourselves. Maybe offer tools every now and then if you are in an intimate relationship with us. Allow us the space to advocate for ourselves. You know, allow us the space to grow into who we want to be. Also, tell us when we hurt you. Tell us when we harm you. Tell us when we do something you don't like. Because that's what adults do. And know that we are really, truly doing our best. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please like, subscribe, share, or all of the above. Also, join the Patreon if you want to hear more intimate details about my life, about how I go about dating as an autistic person, about how I go about creating spaces for myself that are sensory friendly. Go ahead and become a patron, and hopefully it helps y'all live fuller, healthier lives. All right? Stay weird. Bye.